Alright, Internet, what's up? We're live. I'm Chuck the Liberty Geek, and, well, my favorite Elder Scrolls was Oblivion. Why did I mention that? Today's episode. First off, let me welcome everyone who's never been here to the Voluntary Virtues Network, started by Michael Shanklin. I'm Chuck the Liberty Geek. Let's talk some anarchy. So, sorry for starting late. We had some technical difficulties on Randall's end. It's all settled out. It's all settled now. We're ready to go. And today I want to start a little mini series. I'm going to be faster than normal because I'm starting a little late. Like I said, I'm sorry. And I'm going to do a mini series about, popular fictional media, how it depicts statism, and how we can, apply it to real life. So I thought I'd start off with something moderately well known in nerd culture. I thought I'd start with the Elder Scrolls franchise. The Elder Scrolls franchise is composed of games like Arena, Daggerfall, Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, Elder Scrolls Adventures, Redguard, the Elder Scrolls Online MMO, and it's got a huge amount of lore at the disposal of it. So let's get started. So I think the best place to analyze statism within the franchise and how we can look at it in real life starts within the second era of the Elder Scrolls timeline. And the second era depicts a lot of war. In Elder Scrolls, there is a continent known as Tamriel. Tamriel contains a lot of countries, including countries such as Morrowind, Skyrim, Hammerfall, Cyrodiil, Valenwood, Somerset Isle, Elsevere, and the Black March. That's all of them. So, all of these factions are fighting for control of the Empire, which are not just factions at these times, these are all separate warring countries run by... Oh, and I forgot to mention High Rock, which is also another country. Oops. So, Cyrodiil. They're all fighting, and Cyrodiil is fighting, and the Imperials are fighting the Red Guards, and eventually comes a man known as Talos. He's a Nord from Skyrim, and he comes under the imperial name of Tiber Septim. Easily one of the most important names in the Elder Scrolls franchise. He completely shapes how the modern games go, starting from Morrowind on. Most of the game, and even the first two, most of the games take place in the third era, which is after kind of the result of the war. So let's get started in the second era. Talos, aka Tiber Septim. From the Elder Scrolls wiki, it says, a great general, Talos, leads us after his lord's assassination, began his career as the greatest conqueror in history of the land, better known by his imperial name, Tiber Septim. His armies conquered all of Tamriel, creating the empire that bears his name even today, and ushering in the Third Era. Now, this is not only from the Elder Scrolls wiki, this is from a book in the Elder Scrolls games. There's a book you can read, and it's from the Pocket's Guide. I think it's something along the lines of the Pocket Guide to the History of the Empire. This is specifically about the Second Era. And so what's important about the Second Era is two particular games take place in the Second Era. These games are The Elder Scrolls Online, and a spin-off called The Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard. Now, Redguard is absolutely fascinating. Redguard takes place in the middle of after Tiber Septims and his armies have taken over Tamriel. One of the countries there that the Empire is going after is Hammerfall, which is the current home of the Redguards, who are also foreign to Tamriel. They come from another continent, which I don't remember the name of off the top of my head, but it's not as relevant to the subject. So the game takes place from the perspective of a Redguard named Cyrus, and most of the game takes place in, if not all of it, I can't remember, it's been so long. The combat was awful, but the story and the writing were fantastic, as is with older Bethesda games before Morrowind. Morrowind is kind of like, in my opinion, when the Elder Scrolls series gets really, really good, and Oblivion happens, and Skyrim's still a good game, but Oblivion will always be my favorite. Although Morrowind has the best setting, Oblivion, in my opinion, has the best like melee combat, and Skyrim has the best, accessibility, which not as important to me because I'm not a casual. Whatever. Um, but for real, um, the idea is that Tiber Septim's armies come and they're fighting. The game takes place after they fought with the Red Guards at Hammerfell, and the Red Guards lost. So what's important about this? A government fighting another government, and they basically put all of these laws and regulations on Hammerfall, specifically in the capital at the time, Strosmakai. And that's where the game mostly takes place. And it's really interesting to get this perspective from these people who, usually in the Elder Scrolls games, the people praise the Empire and stuff like that. There's not many non-statists in the game, and this was a game where, since the Empire had forcefully taken over the Red Guard, you could finally get some anti-Empire, some anti-Empire perspective at the time of the Second Era, which take for what you will, because they just want back their old government, which is still a government because they're statists, whatever. I mean, even then, Redguard was under constant civil war between two different factions who wanted their own throne, and it was a huge mess, It was a very awful, huge mess, and yeah. So what's interesting about this is we can look at, from all these factions fighting each other and eventually coming together under the banner of Tiber Septim and his empire, we can actually apply this in real life to, China. Look at ancient China's history about all of these dynasties and empires fighting each other before unified China comes along, and we have the likes of Mao Zedong and communism, and it's like I said, there is real life implications we can look at, and we can easily apply them, and even if not apply them, just look at them. And there's another special note I made in my notes about there's another faction that was not part of the Empire, but they didn't get attacked until much later. The Aldmari Dominion, which is the home faction of, in the Second Era, I believe it was the Altmer, which are the High Elves, for common tongue, whatever, if you've never played the game. The Aldmari Dominion, the High Elves come from the island of Somerset Isle. It's an island that's part of Tamriel, but it's not part of Tamriel because it's an island, so. And this is a game in like medieval fantasy type technology, but they do have some flying ships depending on the level of magic that is available within the country. So there was this incident in the Khajiit. They're from this desert, tropical desertish place called Elsvir, and they had this religion at the time where the moon was the two moons of Tamriel, of the planet. I forgot the name of the planet. I think it's Nirn, but don't quote me on that. Is extremely important to them, and it disappears for whatever reason. And then when it reappears, the Aldmari Dominion representatives come to the Elsvir Confederacy, as it was known at the time, for the Khajiit, and they were the ones that claimed that they were the reason the moons came back. And because of this, one state taking over another state and enslaving the people of that state, the Elsvir Confederacy, the Khajiit, become a client state to the Somerset Isles, Aldmari Dominion, basically calling it slavery without the name. You know the drill. And it's just really interesting to look at. And I mean, this is just a Second Era. So this is basically, in my opinion, in the franchise's lore, this is when we really can get a look at what war does to a place. Even in the lores, we know that Tiber Septim and his armies were, especially after the Red Guard with the Hammerfell incident, when they took that over, were really low on money at the time. And one of his advisors kept saying, well, let's go to Morrowind. And even Tiber Septim at the time was afraid of the tribunal, which is basically what the head of the government was called in Morrowind. But again, statism. Eventually, they have a lot of ebony, which is an important mining, which is important smithing material in Tamriel. So, and he thinks, so he can make my empire, some money. So eventually, he attacks Morrowind, and Morrowind's tribunal surrenders to the empire, basically unifying Tamriel under the Cyrodiilic Empire, under the Tiber Septim banner. So, pretty sad, pretty sad. So, let me look at my chat right quick to make sure that no, actually, Fallout is not better. Fallout has interesting lore. I'll cover it someday, but I really like the gameplay of the Elder Scrolls games better, especially Oblivion and Skyrim. So, now that we've looked at that, and we can say, well, gee, that was pointless. And I mentioned, no, this completely represents ancient China and how they were always warring with each other, and it's incredibly silly. So I think the next place we should go to is, let's go to the Third Era. So what happens during the Third Era? Well, we basically see during the Third Era, it was when the majority of the big main Elder Scrolls games take place as the Third Era, such as Arena, Daggerfall. Oh, I can't say such as. The only non-Third Era main storyline game that takes place is Skyrim. So the rest of them take place in the Third Era. Arena, Daggerfall, Morrowind, and Oblivion all take place during the Third Era. And the Third Era is all about the Septim line that rules the Cyrodiilic, whatever you want to call it, empire. For 433 years, this empire goes, and like Rome, it wavers. After Tiber Septim, there was no one as what the game says competent, but statism logic, right? It's you're competent if you can conquer people, of course, right? But anyways, there's not many people that are as good leaders as Tiber Septim afterwards, because he already conquered all of Tamriel. Now the job is to keep it in line, and they weren't always doing a good job. So the Cyrodiilic Emperor is crumbling due to many incompetent leaders after the fall, and civil wars break out, a lot of them. Arena, Daggerfall, Morrowind, none of these games really talk as much about the civil wars, a little bit. But what's interesting is, if you look at Oblivion has a bunch of great examples of statism. Morrowind probably does. My memory of Morrowind is not as good as it should be. I haven't played it in a long time because it's old. But in Oblivion, the main plot line of Oblivion is basically you, for whatever reason, you are in a Empire-run prison in Cyrodiil. The whole game takes place in the province of Cyrodiil, not Skyrim. You can't go to Skyrim. You can't go to the Black Marsh. You can't go, whatever. For a game at that time, it was a pretty big game. And it still is. It's still a great game with all the mods available for it. It's still a fantastic game. But where I'm going with this is that statism is so huge in Oblivion that the main plot point that starts your character off is you witness the assassination. Somehow, as a prisoner, your cell happens to be the escape route for the Emperor at the time, Uriel Septim VII. And so it's your lucky day because you get to go break free too, because you're the government. They can break their own rules for all they care, So you're escaping with Uriel, and you witness his assassination. And it is your job to try to help basically rebuild the Empire, find his illegitimate child, and rebuild the Empire because, yay, the government's so good! Sorry, kind of annoys me a little bit. I was a statist at the time of playing the game, so I totally went with it. But for real, it's... So, I can hate on it for being statist all I want. I still love the games. I still absolutely love them. That won't change. Maybe the way I'll play the games changes and how I think about them. But okay. So another great example of not only the main plot line is, everyone hears about the Emperor Uriel Septim being assassinated, and everyone's sad. All the citizens that are not part of the Mythic Dawn cult are extremely sad because he's been assassinated, and our beloved Emperor. You're in Cyrodiil, which is the heart of the Empire, so of course the statism would probably be the strongest there, right? So one other great example of, abuse of government in real life, this is very good parallel to real life, is there's a quest in Oblivion, and the quest is called Corruption and Conscience. And the idea of this quest is you go to this town. I won't name drop too many names just to confuse the non-Elder Scrolls players, but you go into this town, and one of the citizens complains that they're being fined for everything. Literally fined for everything, which is pretty much how we've turned out here in modern America and modern statism globally. So they're being fined for everything, and they're being fined obnoxious amounts for littering, for doing this or that, for being too loud, and you find and you meet. So you go find the second in command of the guard named Garrus. And he basically says, yeah, my boss is probably corrupt, but I can't prove it. I can't go to my king, I forgot what he's called at the time. It's been so long. But he can't go to the boss of his boss and say, sorry, my face itches, and say, look, my boss is corrupt. Here's the proof, because he has no proof. Because, yeah. So the idea is that there's 3 ways the quest can end. You can kill this corrupt guard and get Garrus to become in command. You can help the citizen who wants to kill this corrupt captain of the guard. Or you can do it Garrus's way, which is still, all 3 of these ways are illegal, by the way. Would be illegal, especially in real life. So if you do it Garrus's way, which I did on my first run through, which is you sneak into the captain of the guard's room, you look through his stuff, and you find a note which basically says he's charging these exorbitant amount of prices on all these fines which shouldn't exist, and because the leader is so busy and so inattentive because he's stressed about his job, that he hasn't noticed that he's been skimming all this money off and sending it back to his family and living like a king off of it. So you give it to Garrus. Garrus shows it to his boss, and Garrus becomes the new captain of the guard. And you're supposed to go, yay, justice has prevailed in the state. But really, has it? Even if you do it that way, you still broke into property, public property, I guess, but you still broke in there because you're not a guard. If you look at it in modern status terms, you broke in there because you're not a guard. And then on top of that, you rifle through this guy's private property, which is his artifacts, his clothing, his drawers. You find the note, which is not for your eyes, which is a private note written back to his family or whoever he's written it to. You give it to someone else by breaching privacy. And, I mean, great. So, now if this happened in real life, government would probably praise whoever the officer was for making all this money because, that's how they are. But, so that's the idea. And then the cycle continues for more statism. In the 4th era, which is when Skyrim takes place, which is probably the most famous of all the Elder Scrolls games right now, because it's the most recent, forgetting about the Elder Scrolls Online. Game sucks. But now, the point of Elder Scrolls Online is that the Eldamari Dominion in the Empire, the Eldamari Dominion at this point I forgot the word I'm looking for. It's composed of the Altmer, which are the Higher Elves, and the Bosmer, which are Wood Elves. So it is a combined might of Somerset Isle and Valenwood. They go to war with the Empire. The Empire loses. And so the idea is that in order for the Empire to keep surviving under control of the Elmari Dominion, the current Emperor of the time signs a deal saying that they will stop worshipping Talos, or Talos, however you want to pronounce it, Tiber Septim, as one of the 9 divines, because according to them, he became a god after he, united Cyrodiil. Whether it's true or not, I believe it actually is true because, video game logic. But the point is that the Elmari Dominion want worship of Talos to be stopped. And you are the Dragonborn, one of the Dragonborn. There's more than one, depending on DLC you play. You are the Dragonborn in Skyrim. You don't know it yet. Skyrim is under civil war between the Elmari Dominion-controlled Empire versus the Stormcloaks, which is another faction that wants to create another government, a more racist government, but still a government. Oh. And it's just hectic from there. And I think the idea that we need to come together with is, especially under the Elder Scrolls lore, is that the state creates war. Look at all the eras. There's war all the time. There's one country will fall, another country will take over. Look at Rome. Look how Rome rise and fell, and then, all these other countries came out of it. The Nazis rise and fell. Statism. United States Empire is rising, and then it will fall. Just like every empire. Chinese Empire is also rising, and now it'll fall too, eventually. And if anything that this Elder Scrolls franchise lore can teach us is that great games. Absolutely fantastic games. I love them. I love the stories. Absolutely. I love running through them. I have a bunch of hours in them. A lot of hours in them. And I think what we can take away from this is that war will always happen as long as there is a state involved. And I think that's the biggest message. Am I right? Am I wrong? Let me know in the comments, especially if you're watching this as a rerun. I still read them. Well, I don't know why I wouldn't. I mean, I want to connect with the fans that are watching this or that do watch this eventually. So, Elder Scrolls is a great way to describe to a nerd how the state will always create war, whether it's for its benefit or because it wants to forcefully, which I guess is also for its benefit, forcefully take something from others, steal from the citizens via taxes. I mean, the whole history, and I just scratched the iceberg, the very tippy tip of the iceberg. So, if you want to know more, I suggest you go and read the Elder Scrolls Wiki. It's fantastic. Information is extremely well laid out. This search function works quite well. You can search whatever you're looking for. Look up Tiber Septim. He's a huge part of the lore and the story. And so that's that, really. I don't have much more to say on that. But this is going to be a series I'm going to continue doing. Like I said at the beginning of the show, you can always pull something real, even out of fictional media, such as the Elder Scrolls and its theme of war. War will never end with a state. So, that's that, Liberty Geeks. You can catch me next week at 9 o'clock Eastern, United States time. 9 o'clock to 9:30 as always. Like I said, I'm sorry for starting late today. There were technical difficulties on Randall's end of the show, but it's all fixed. Not mad at him. Check Randall out. Roads to Liberty, starting from 8 to 9 o'clock on Voluntary Virtues Network, brought to you by Michael Shanklin. And I would like to say I'm enjoying my time on the Voluntary Virtues Network so far. I don't plan on stopping. And I would like to once again promote my project with several of the other Voluntary Virtues hosts about a liberty-minded, tabletop, dice-rolling, good old-fashioned pen and paper role-playing game that I'm going to be doing with the fellow hosts here. It's going to be a story about liberty-minded stories, and I hope you all watch it. It's going to be a great collaborative project. Thank you to Randall, as always. He will be doing a major part of the show, which is why it is a Liberty Geek and Roads to Liberty production. My time slot is almost over. It is almost 9:29 according to my clock. I just wanted to say thanks for watching. And like I said, just because I talk crap about Statism and the Elder Scrolls games does not mean they're not good games, except for the MMO. Anyways, doesn't mean they're not good games. You should check them out. They're great games. They're great stories. Elder Scrolls, Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim especially Oblivion. But Skyrim, if you want the latest one. Skyrim, like I said, is easily the most accessible. So, once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week with a new topic. Peace.